early.
Yeah.
And so we did soil tests, Joe did soil tests, very long potassium. So we do have we do have spotted lantern flies, which are those things that eat grapes and stuff. So we don't know if that did it. A horticulturist was one of our interns.
Yeah.
And she thinks it's probably more from soil related than bugs, because the lanternflies aren't known to go on.
Yeah. And I thought they ate later in the season. I've been reading a lot about them.
They've been eating the milkweed, and the milkweed's poisonous to them.
Right. Yes. This is the Labor Day show. And it's they fly in, so we'll see practice sessions. They fly right over my house. Like they go, and they turn around.
It's terrifying. I mean, I was in the parking lot a minute ago and went over, and I just like.
Yeah. They just started
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
All right.
Do I need to put my face on the camera thing?
I will do it, actually. I'm here.
Okay. You'll sit in front so you don't
It's
feel.
been.
And how are you?
Yay. Yay. Ryan's gonna pop in.
How long go up at height?
Tomorrow, it's getting taken, there's an opening tomorrow, but everything is taken down tomorrow.
I can't go.
It's okay.
It's an opening closing,
It's,
right?
yeah, they have the closing of the opening, or the opening.
The closing?
thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, we will, we have like,
You can.
No, we're good.
You can
We're
come
good.
to my house and see everything.
I know, but I wanted like seeing it in a gallery setting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my God, she's obsessed with this.
they are.
Look the mug Amon got me for my birthday.
I did.
What's the name inside of it? Just
There was iced coffee inside.
It's empty now. Yeah. Understandable.
Yeah. That's a great picture.
Thank you. It looks so peaceful and
It does.
sunlit and
And empty.
everything you want to take.
I mean, it just looks very spacious.
Yeah, no, it looks very
It
clean.
looks very clean.
I've never.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's nice to like reflection, like the colors in the windows because of like nature and
Yeah. Yeah.
We get reds, greens, and blues in there.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yep. All right.
It's 12:14, so I'm just like watching the clock. But yeah, once it starts, I'll go into an introduction and then we can get started with the talk. I'm literally just watching the clock go. Okay, cool. Because yeah, the second it hits 12:15, we'll be live. Yeah, you can't swear anymore. We'll be on Facebook. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Emily Chmulowicz. I'm the Artist Opportunities Manager here at the Morgan Conservatory. And it is my pleasure to introduce Lari Gibbons. She's been here for the past week and a half, 2 weeks or so, making work here in our space. And I'm really excited to introduce her today. Also, thank you so much for the Wingate Foundation for allowing the Artist-in-Residence program to happen, and by default, these artist talks to happen. So really quickly, Lari Gibbons explores new and traditional approaches to printmaking through innovative projects. She is a professor at the University of North Texas, where she serves at a printmaking, as she teaches printmaking and serves as a collaborative printer. Her work is published in numerous books, including Bill Fick and Beth Grabowski's Printmaking, a complete guide to materials and processes. As an educator, Lari has taught workshops at Anderson Ranch Art Center, Haystack Mountain School of Crafts, and the Amon Carter Museum of Art, among other institutions. She has presented at conferences such as Mid-America Print Council, International Mokuhanga Association, and Southern Graphics Council International, whose 2019 conference she co-organized. Lari received an MFA in printmaking from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and a BA from Grinnell College. So everybody, let us welcome Lari.
All right. Hello to the virtual audience, and thank you especially to the face-to-face audience for being here today. I really appreciate you coming and letting me talk about my work. Today, for about 20 minutes or so, I want to talk about my current work. I want to talk about how I got to this point and why I investigate the things that I do. And then I also want to talk about how that relates to my project at the Morgan. There we go. So my current work uses as a springboard modular typefaces, which came about 80 to 100 years ago. They were an idealistic impulse from the Bauhaus era. And typically ones like alpha blocks took the 26 characters of the alphabet and tried to break them down into their component parts, little modules that could be used to make letters themselves, so that typesetters in the press room, instead of setting up a letter A, could use the components of a letter A in order to create a more universal idea of design. This was the idealistic impulse behind this was rooted in an idea that press rooms could be more efficient, and that lead type could be reduced in a press room, and that things could therefore be more economical. But in reality, even though the idea was great on paper, probably, sorry, bad printmaking joke, even though the idea and the impulse was great, typesetters didn't really like it. It wasn't really practical. It wasn't what they were used to. And so it actually wasn't efficient for the way that presses usually worked. But having said that, even though on a practical level, it's considered somewhat of a design failure, I really like modular type, and so do many contemporary artists, because it allows us to look at language and text and type in a really different, innovative way, which I think is the most interesting part of the impulse that brought it about. So you can see at the very bottom of this specimen sheet some of the shapes that I started to use that inspired me. When I first started looking at these, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them. I was actually working on a different body of work, but I just started vectorizing them so I could study them. And by vectorizing them, I'll talk about that a little more later and show you an example of it. I was trying to break down the letters or study them, and to study the system behind them so that I could recreate them and use them in my own way. This is one of the first finished pieces that I made once I started working with these. And it's a large piece. When it's on display, it's about 5 feet by 5 feet. And like the sources that it came from, it comes from many different components or parts. It's built up through layers of printing. This is a close-up or a detail shot of just one of them. When I work, one of the themes of my work is that I really like to show the rawness of the materials that I'm working with, which is usually wood or copper, sometimes stone, or sometimes the mesh of a screen. But wood is one of my biggest influences. And I like to contrast that with the precision of edges that lately have been made through machining process, such as CNC or laser cutting. But in the past, I've also used many other processes as well. I really like the tension between these perfectly machined surfaces and the rawness of the materials that I enjoy working with. And I like what that creates in the studio. This is a brief little clip showing how I make these in my studio. I like using blends of ink where one color can turn into another, or one shade can turn into another. And I use a large roller to roll out these blends of ink. I place stencils on an inked block, run it through a press, pull it off, and you can see that the colors or the shades that I've rolled out on the block, they only come through the part of the stencil that's been cleared. These particular stencils are made with a laser cutter, but you can make them with a Cricut. You can cut them by hand. Stenciling is so much fun. All right, there it is. As I've gone back to these elements over and over again, I've begun to integrate a lot of color, because of course color is really fun to work with. And also as a printmaker who had to put work in frames and hinge mount them for decades of my career, I really wanted this work to feel more object-like, kind of like typesetting itself or working with wooden type, which is one of my inspirations and great joys. And so all of these are archivally mounted on blocks that are then assembled on the wall. And I've made more and more of these. They're becoming more and more abstract and minimal. Some people say that they now begin to look like punctuation instead of letter forms. And I'm trying to be really open-minded about where this is going and just let the work have its own voice. I'm lucky at this point in my career that I get to do that, to let the work speak for itself. When I'm in my studio thinking about why I'm doing these, besides the other reasons I mentioned, I often think about how at least in my life, it feels like I'm ever more inundated with more and more spoken and written word. But more and more, I feel like many of us are becoming more fragmented and disjointed and cut off from a bigger picture that I think newspapers and magazines and printed publications brought us to. So these are some of the thoughts that echo through my mind as I work with these elements in my studio. That shows some of the woodblock characteristics of them. So when I came to the Morgan, I was super excited because one of the first drawers that I opened had the alpha blocks specimen sheet. And I was like, okay, so this is definitely meant to be. It was in a drawer with also the California job case layout, which is one of the reasons why this alpha blocks failed. Because you couldn't set it up in a California job case, which is what all print shops had. So I decided to make a book because you all have extraordinary letterpresses here that are really special and are a huge gift for an artist in residence to come in and use. You have a really wonderful collection of platen as well as cylinder presses that I was excited to get on. And I decided that the structure of the book would be a Japanese stab-bound book, which is a super simple, basic structure. It's often one of the first ones that people learn. But for me, the reason that I wanted to use it in particular is that with this book structure, the fold occurs on the long edge or on the edge of a book that you touch. And that allows the deckled sheet of paper to show on the spine side. And so, and I don't have an example of that in my slide, but I do have some examples in the room people can look at. And because the Morgan is known for its beautiful paper that's been professionally made by experts here, I wanted to use this translucent abaca, which is a really extraordinary special thing, kind of like your presses, so that the layers of ink could show through in the book, and I could allow the decals versus the cut edges to kind of play off each other in the book structure. So these are some examples of the vectorized shapes that I've been playing with, and this is what a job might look like before I start cutting it using machining tools, either a laser cutter or a CNC router. This design is kind of turned on its side, so it's got two blocks running up and down, even though we read books here, we read books from left to right. So if you turn your head and kind of look at this, you can see what a spread would look like on these books. And I gang up the jobs in a laser cutter just so I can cut it more efficiently. These are vector cut on the blocks that I made to print on the letterpress are vector cut, meaning that a laser cutter goes around the edge of the form rather than engraving it out of a block, which is one of the most time-efficient ways to cut. It's a really wonderful thing, and it captures the precision of what one might be trying to do. Then the very thin wood veneer that I've cut, I apply a double-sided adhesive to the back, which is used in letterpress printing. It's made by Boxcar Press. And the veneer is placed on a type-high block so that it's safe for the letterpress. So in a way, I'm kind of making a fast and cheap version of wood type. It's just like the minimal version that I need to get an image onto paper. The job is then locked up in a press using traditional furniture, which you have a lot of here, and using coins which tighten it into place. So this is the Vandercook SP25, which I'm so fortunate to use during my residency. You can see in that first video I showed at the beginning of my presentation that I was using a really big roller to create gradations of ink in my imagery. But here, and one of the reasons I wanted to use a Vandercook, the Vandercook does it for you. This is one of its specialties, is you can make one color disappear into another, or you can make a light disappear into a dark on the press. These are all the wood blocks that I cut for the book that I'm making. It has 9 individual pages. And each one of these blocks has a layer of ink that's been printed off of it. That's why it's stained white in this case. And the pages will be folded in half as I construct the book. For those of you who are here in person, some of the proofs of the pages are sitting around the room. I love taking a minimalist approach to things, as you can probably tell. I was a maximalist early on, but I've grown more minimal as my life has gone on. I like to put a great deal of craft and energy into doing things really, really well and seeing what minimal of means will express my complete idea. I do think that what I've completed so far does need more work, so I plan to do that. But one of the lovely things that I discovered during my proofing sessions is that, as intended, the paper, you can see through the pages. So my book will be made out of these different values or colors, and you'll be able to see the letter forms play off of each other through the translucent applique. So that's super exciting. A lot of people want to know how you can print a sheet of handmade paper on a letterpress, because it is a big machine with many different cylinders. And if you just fed handmade paper with those beautiful, gorgeous deckled edges that I showed you, if you just fed that straight into a press, it would get mangled and it would just roll around the cylinders as the engine is going. So you can attach it very simply to a carrier sheet. And for this carrier sheet, I just used cheap paper that's like a butcher paper, all cut to the same size. And that way you can take all these lovely irregular sheets and feed them through the same way every time in registration. This is me on the SP25. So excited about getting to use this press. It's the biggest Vandercook I've ever used, but not just for the sake of wanting to print on a big press, although I currently hail from Texas, so I do have that impulse, but it allowed me to print a whole spread at the same time. So I will say I tried to do it on some of the smaller presses, but ultimately it landed here. It's a wonderful machine to use. Also during my residency, I've done a couple smaller experiments. I don't have much paper making experience. I'm much more of a printmaker, but I do think some of the skill set can transfer with good training and with good guidance. And so I've done a little bit of experimenting, some of which is successful, some of it which needs a lot more practice and guidance, but this is definitely the right environment for that to happen. And so I had wonderful staff members like Emily helping me along the way, and lots of inspiration through the workshop series that takes place here on the weekends, or many weekends. I want to talk a little bit, if I have time, I think I do have some time, about why it is exactly that I'm interested in modular imagery, because as you'll see at the end of my presentation, I actually started as a very traditional artist who was drawing in a representational way through sight. And my imagery has taken this turn over many years of experiences, just like many artists. My interest in modular elements actually started through my career in teaching, which I've taught for more than 25 years at this point at the university level. And I'm constantly looking for new ways to explain familiar concepts to my students and to engage them with it and make it fun and exciting to learn. Hopefully I succeed sometimes with that. So one year during the pandemic, I was trying to work with students to teach the color wheel and how you can print a minimum of colors to get a maximum of printed. You can print 3 colors, but you can actually get 6 or more once they run through the press and once they overlap. And so I made for them, while it was distance learning, I made for them a series of circles and showed them how in printing them in different ways with a minimum of colors, we could get a maximum of different effects. And while it started as just a simple teaching demo, and as you saw, a colophon for a a collection of prints on color that we were making. I thought it was really fun. What modular elements did for me is that printmakers, we often print many different matrices in registration. And they are often planned so that we come up with an edition that's absolutely consistent and could be sold on a market. And while that can be fun to learn at first, it can also be stifling for an artistic career over time to always be locked into this set of matrices that fit together one way and always are meant to print the same way over and over and over. This was really enlightening and fun and engaging to me. And I thought, I can make a whole bunch of fixed elements without a fixed idea of how they're going to come together in the end. And that way I could play in the studio a lot more and really get excited about making work again. Another sort of factor that entered into this is that I really love a good technical challenge and I love technical innovation while also keeping my foot in with traditional craft and craftsmanship. And so I often collaborate with other people just to see if we can do things. And I worked with Leah Atgerter at Anderson Ranch to see if we could CNC engrave plates together. It's something that neither one of us had done before, but our different experiences combined, we thought we could do it, and sure enough, we did. I also, back in my own studio, I wanted to see if I could use cut vinyl, plotter cut vinyl as a resist and intaglio etching methods, which I was delighted to learn works. So once again, since there were so many questions surrounding whether or not any of this would even work or do anything, I just made a bunch of modules because how can they fail? I can make a circle. I can make a few lines. I don't understand how they all fit together, but today I can do this. And then I can put them together in many different ways that I might not have anticipated or planned, and hopefully come up with something that feels really finished along the way. So this has really helped me after years of professional edition printing. This has really helped me re-engage with the creative process without over planning and overthinking things. Getting some of these machines and processes to fire up is quite time consuming. So to make other elements fun and playful is really important to me. I want to talk about, I think, one last theme, and I think I have just enough time, which is how this idea of collaboration really spurs my creative approach. About half of my career, although now that I get older, it's becoming a third of my career, was this collaborative printmaking, where I ran a press, alongside teaching printmaking at a university, I ran a press where I helped realize the work of artists who typically were not from printmaking. Some of them had print experience, a lot of them don't. And I helped them realize a project at our press, sometimes about 8 a year, sometimes only 1 or 2. It depended on the complexity of the project. And I also trained students to get involved with the collaboration so that as they develop their career, they might have additional options. Professional printing is still really a thing, and you can make good money and have a great career doing it. The other privilege of collaborating with others, and this is the most important one to me, is you really get insight as to how other people think and how they work, what excites them, what shuts them down, what liberates and frees them, and what stifles them. This is a privilege to have access to this. This was a huge learning opportunity beyond just the technique in the classroom for me. So I want to highlight just 2 projects that very clearly relate to my work. I won't go over all of them. One of the last ones that our press did was for Allison Czar, who's a sculptor and woodcut artist from LA. And the challenge she brought to me that I loved, she often works with vintage wallpapers in her work and other ephemera. And she wanted me to make a hand-dyed or hand-tinted sheet of paper that would have a wall cover-like effect on it, which you see one of our proofs on the left side of this slide. And she didn't want it to be screen print because she'd done that with other artists before. She wanted it to be something that I did. So I said, well, we'll do relief printing. So she drew a cotton ball, and we came up with a system where we would fix the stem and the outline, the brown parts of the cotton ball, we would fix them in place. and ink those up in brown ink. And then we would ink up the bowl of the cotton in white ink. And we would run it through the press together. And this is the finished print. I think it had 4 or 5 matrices and some hand coloring by the time we were done with it. I've got just a couple more examples I'll go through. I think we're almost there on time. Another one that was seminal to my approach and my work was a collaboration with Jeffrey Dell, who happened to be another Texas-based artist, but who's known for screen print. And again, he was like, if I'm going to work with you, I want to do something different. Let's do woodcut together. So he gave me the drawing that you see on the left, and I created jigsaw blocks that we put blend rolls of these color inks that you see on the right. And there were 2 blocks printed in registration. The one on the left is the first layer. The one on the right is the last layer or the key layer. And this project ended up getting complicated. So we spent about a year editioning it, as we also did for Allison's Ours project. It's printed on translucent UPO paper, a synthetic paper, which is also one of the reasons it took a while. But I always learn a lot from these. Sometimes I collaborate with industry. And so I worked with Gamblin to refine their line of relief inks, again, bringing it to the classroom and working with my students on that. A lot of people want to know why it is that I pick up on particular innovations like CNC routing or laser cutting. Like, why would I get involved with that in the first place? Is my interest really genuine, or am I just doing it for the sake of doing it? And for me, it always comes out of necessity. There always has to be a reason why it's going to become important for my work. So as a side project, me and a group of really wonderful students, we restored a letterpress one year for UNT that I had found. And this team was so efficient, I thought it would take us a year. It took them like a couple weeks. And so it was amazing. And I was like, uh-oh, I just don't have our type sorted, nor do I have the ability to make polymer plates, but we do have a CNC router. And I was familiar with some projects that Hamilton Wood Type had done with CNC routing type. They were some of the first doing it. Juliette Shen is the name of a typographer they collaborated with. And so knowing that they did it, I embarked on that myself to learn how to do it in our own studio. And then lastly, sometimes I have the privilege of collaborating with people who are outside the arts altogether, and that also influences my work. And so this is one of my colleagues, Dr. James H. Kennedy, who's an environmental philosopher and biologist. And before I became a collaborative printer, we would go to the southern tip of Chile together, where he studied watershed systems and insects. And this is an earlier example of my work when it was representational. But the more that I worked with research scientists over the years and accompanied them and watched how they went about solving complex problems over the course of decades, like artists are on a quick cycle. We have to have solo shows every year. But research scientists, they devote a lifetime sometimes to looking at one problem many different ways. So it inspired me to take my work to a deeper level, studying watershed systems in Texas and finding ways to make large-scale CNC routed, hand-printed elements that explored these themes. And also looking at data systems with them together, which there were plenty of. You can see craft, even though I integrate new technology, craft is still really important to me. This is the last slide. In terms of future directions, another collaboration that I started during the pandemic was one in which I was asked to translate traditional sume ink drawings from Japanese artists into laser cut blocks that could be printed in through Mokuhanga, which is the traditional Japanese way of printing. It uses water-based ink instead of oil-based ink. And as it did for many people, the pandemic really changed the project. And so it extended it over time and allowed us to have a lot of Zoom meetings with master carvers and printers in Japan. So it actually made the project deeper and better. And this gave me an initial insight and investment in the process. And then later this fall, I'll get to go directly to Japan to study it at MiLab residency, where I'll also study Eastern sheet forming and etchizen. So I'm very excited about that. Again, I want to thank the face-to-face local community for coming today and listening to me talk about my work. I want to thank the virtual community for listening as well. But most of all, I want to thank everybody who makes all of this programming at the Morgan possible. You have an extraordinary resource here in Cleveland, Ohio, that's very, very rich and deep and well-connected. And it's done great things for me, and I hope it does well in the future as well. So thanks for having me out here. Hi, virtual audience. All right.